Hello, everyone. It is I, Isaac, the Clapper. It is that time of year again. Time to put our official rankings in order of the top 10 and the bottom 10 movies of 2024. Before we head into that, we'll set a few ground rules. Number one, as the cinema regulars, we are limited to only new movies released in theaters. This excludes movies that are released on streaming services like Netflix, HBO Max, and such. Two, obviously, this is only limited to the films we actually saw. So movies like this, and this, uh, they are not going to be included in this because we couldn't even, ironically, go and enjoy them. So why would we go and do that? Uh, Number three. This is the last year that this rule will be implemented, so stick with us. But films released at the tail end of 2023, but we did not get to see until the early part of 2024, are still going to be involved in this list. We apologize for that oversight. It has been corrected, so it will not happen in the future. So this is the last time you'll have to deal with that. So bear with us. That being said, let's move on into the bottom 10 movies of 2024. Coming in at the number 10 spot, we have Speak No Evil. Now, this movie was a foreign film originally that they then remade into a movie for American audiences. And the original premise of the foreign film does not translate to what they changed in the new movie. So instead of it being polite people from a culture where that's their culture, where that's their, general thing, they're just polite, to just being the stupidest fucking Americans I've ever seen in my life. They were egregiously bad, and this remake did not need to happen because it only came out like 2 years ago as well. So they just really looked at this movie and went, "I can do better," and they didn't. Coming in at the number 9 spot, we have Imaginary. This movie was all over the place in Blumhouse's advertising in the early part of this year. It failed horribly. The only thing that it succeeded in doing was getting a literal like 6-second loop of music stuck in my head for the longest time. This movie had pretty cheesy practical effects, and the general premise just kind of became confusing, as well as the characters being extremely bland. Coming in at the number 8 spot, Kellen probably has this movie a little higher than I do, probably a lot higher than I do. We have the movie Anyone But You. This was one of Sydney Sweeney's big movies this year, alongside Glenn Powell. Glenn Powell has been in some good movies. Sydney Sweeney has not. We'll get to that later. But this movie was just, it was kind of a garden variety, like, will they, won't they kind of story that was just kind of not done in a good way. It was extremely boring. The characters like hated each other for literally almost no reason. Just the fact that they didn't understand what was going on means they like led to the entire movie happening. If a certain thing hadn't happened in the start of the beginning of the movie, this movie would not work. So it was just bad writing. Moving into the number 7 spot, we have Tarot. Now, this movie was another attempt at a bringing, creepy occult thing. They kind of ran out of Ouija movies to make. So they were like, what else can we do? Oh yeah, let's use tarot cards. That's a good natural progression there. Uh the characters in this movie were all extremely dumb. The writing was extremely lazy, and it almost took itself too seriously for what it was. If it hadn't if it hadn't taken itself as seriously as it is, it might have been ironically funny, but it wasn't. It was just bad. I don't have much else to say of it. I try not to say that, but it was just bad. Coming in at the number 6 spot, we have Y2K. This is more of a recent addition to my bottom 10 here. This movie had the most breakneck pace, yet also the slowest speed I have ever seen out of a movie. Because the moment that, like, people started dying in this movie, they were like, oh yeah, let's move on to the next scene. And I'm like, oh yeah, that dude died. I totally forgot about that. And, fucking Fred Durst showing up in the middle of this shit caught me way off guard. I totally forgot who Fred Durst was and what Limp Bizkit was. So this movie made it like just hit home, and I'm just like, what? It was a very bad, very weird choice. Coming in at the number 5 spot, we have Joker 2. This movie was made by someone who hates the movie that they made. That's literally the most accurate statement I can give about this movie. Dude, the guy who made the first Joker movie hated that the first Joker movie was so good that he just made the second one as bad as he possibly could. Also, this movie was just a launch pad for Lady Gaga to sell more like music, basically. She couldn't go more than 5 minutes on screen without singing badly, may I add. Coming in at number 4, we have the movie Cuckoo. This was a movie that it was in this spot. One, because I was deeply disappointed in this movie. I was actually kind of excited for this. It had kind of a cool, like, air about it. I thought it might be interesting. The direction it ended up taking just kind of felt like they just slapped a bunch of half-ass stuff together. The creature was the thing that I was going to go see this movie about, and it was extremely underwhelming. I was sad to see that the word cuckoo was more about the cuckoo bird than, going insane, which is what we thought was going to happen, but it did not. So, only people that went insane were the ones that went and actually paid to go see this movie and said it was good. Something must have happened to them in there. Coming in at the number 3 spot, we have Here. Now, this movie was one of the longest movie-going experiences I've ever had in my life. We had a joke when we left Anyone But You. Kellen had a joke where he said that he felt like he needed to be hooked up to life support after going to go see that movie. That's how I felt after leaving this one. I needed doctors to bring me back to life after the coma this movie put me in. And it really sucked because the idea of it was really cool, but the execution was really, really, really poorly done. Sitting in my number 2 spot, we have a Borderlands movie. This movie was the biggest spit in the face to a franchise I have ever seen, like, just flat out. Like, it did not have any love that the franchise of Borderlands games have in them. The community was outraged by this. This movie was so bad that they announced Borderlands 4 earlier than they were planning on it. Like, they were like, oh shit, they don't like the Borderlands movie. Tell them we're doing Borderlands 4. That'll maybe bring them back. Not even that could save how bad of a movie this was. They changed characters, ages. They miscast characters. They put characters that should not be interacting with each other. It was just a huge mess that did not highlight any of the beautiful things that Borderlands is. Now, before we move on to my number one, I have a couple honorable mentions. First one, just narrowly missing my bottom 10, is the Mufasa movie. That movie did not need to be made. It was a long movie with music that is ultimately forgettable. I forget a lot about what happened in that movie. So, yeah, it wasn't as bad as Speak No Evil though. So that 11th spot. My dishonorable mention for my bottom 10 is The Crow. This movie was deeply, deeply disappointing. I was so excited for this movie, and I hadn't seen the original going into it. So I went in just expecting. I knew what the premise was, and I knew the original actor had died, but that was my extent of it. But we went into it, and I was already disappointed by the direction it took. It was kind of meandering and not very well made. It wasn't the blockbuster that we were promised out of it. And then I watched the original afterwards, and I actually kind of hate it now. So it was it was just not well executed. So we have arrived at the bottom of the barrel. The worst of the worst movies that I have seen this year. Sitting at the number one bad spot, we have Madam Web. I am almost guaranteed I'd be willing to put money on the fact that Kellen and I are agreeing on this fact that this movie is the worst movie made this year. It was egregiously bad. I hated every second of watching this movie. It was I have never hated characters more in my life than I did watching this movie, and the acting was no better on top of it. You could tell the main actress did not want to be in this movie. You can even tell by the trail of PR she did after this movie, actively kind of shitting on it while she was doing it. This was the worst thing that I have seen come out of the Sonyverse, and that's after watching Morbius. So it tells you how bad this movie was. This movie was hot, stinking garbage, and it needed to never see the light of day. So there you have it, folks. The bottom 10 movies of 2024. Hopefully this was informative for you, so that way you stay away from these movies. We watch it so you don't have to. Now, we still have my top 10 and Kellen's top and bottom 10 as well, so make sure to stick around after this. So we'll see you again next year with the next bottom 10, but until then, guys, that's a wrap. Roll credits.